Hello and welcome to a Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discusses whether they are helpful or harmful. I am Cara Strobel.
And I am Harry Anderson. We are two film school underachievers who are heaps good at talking about movies, but not that flash at making them. We want to acknowledge that we are recording this on Wurundjeri land, and we would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We also extend that to any other First Nations people who may be listening today.
Today we are talking about the year 2000 smash hit Miss Congeniality, directed by Donald Petrie and starring and produced by Academy Award winner Sandra Bullock. We have gel in our hair, we haven't slept all night, we're starved, and we're armed. Do not mess with us.
Alrighty, Miss Congeniality from the year 2000, directed by Donald Petrie, written by Mark Lawrence, Katie Ford, and Karen Lucas, starring Sandra Bullock, Michael Caine, Benjamin Bratt, William Shatner, and Candice Bergen. An FBI agent must go undercover in the Miss United States beauty pageant to prevent a terrorist group from bombing the event. We're recording this episode in two different locations, so we'll have varying audio quality, but we're just going to get into it anyway. I'm guessing this was not your first time watching this movie.
No. Big fan. I don't remember the first time I watched it. But probably when it came out. When did it come out? Like 99?
2000.
2000? Yeah, probably the year 2000. But
Yeah.
Possibly the movie.
The year of the millennium.
Yeah. Or maybe it was a home rental only. Maybe it was too violent at 6, but it was just violent enough at 7.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we used to rent this all the time. Also, we used to rent the sequel quite a lot as well, which I can't recommend, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's kind of weird because I surprise, hadn't seen this one and hadn't seen the sequel. So yeah, first time watching Miss Congeniality. I don't know. I feel like in essence, the second one might sound better, might be a better story. Is that a controversial thing to say?
I don't know if it's a controversy. I don't know if there's anybody who's going to give a shit.
There's 6 people and my mum who listen to this. Yeah.
I don't even really remember the story of the second one. Like William Shatner gets kidnapped or something because of his debts, because he's a gambling addict. Oh no, that's right. Cheryl gets kidnapped. So the reigning Miss America or whatever gets kidnapped, and this is a really big deal apparently. And then there's some stuff in Las Vegas. I don't really remember the story actually that much of the second one, even though I have seen it at least 6 times.
Well, I'm sure
Nick Offerman is in it.
Hey, all right. I'm sure we'll cover it at some point. I mean, I feel like it fits the realm of...
I feel like sometime we should do Legally Blonde 2 and Miss Congeniality 2, maybe as a double.
Yeah, cool. Oh, I'm glad this has turned into a pre-production meeting.
Yeah, sorry. We can cut this.
Yeah. Was it a repeat offender in your house growing up?
Yeah.
Did you just watch it heaps, you and your sisters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big, because there was one we could agree on that we liked, so easy going.
Yeah.
Big rewatch appeal. Although I did recently, I was talking to Mum about it, and she was like, yeah, I think that's one you can just watch once and be done with it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We got it so many times. I'm sure you must have watched it with us at least 4 times. But apparently it doesn't stick with it. Also, as a Boston Legal fan, it's really funny for me to have William Shatner and Candice Bergen in this movie together, because after being a fan of this, I was a big fan of Boston Legal, and they're both in that.
Of course you like Boston Legal. It makes perfect sense.
Why is that bad?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe your mum was onto something. One and
yeah,
done.
What do you think? First time.
I thought it was going to be better than it was.
Did I overhype it?
No, not at all. We talked about it a fair bit under the pretense that perhaps it hadn't aged well. There are a few things that sort of perhaps stuck out to you just from what you've been talking to me about it. So I guess going into it, I knew about all the hype. I knew about the weight of it in the zeitgeist, the general premise. I can remember seeing the billboard as a kid when it came out. And I knew the ins and outs of it. I'd actually seen the end before. But I don't think that really mattered too much. I don't think like the twist in the plot is like any reason to make you want to not watch this movie. I think it was just a bit less fun. I think it could exist a bit less fun than, say, something like Legally Blonde, which I think they're kind of similar in a lot of ways, but this one probably doesn't have its own universe rules. It's kind of caught in purgatory between like the serious world of which we know and sort of like the silly hyper realistic world of Legally Blonde. Like, and I'm only bringing that up because we've talked about it recently and because of like the proximity of these films coming out between, you know, a year apart from each other. But I felt like it just wasn't very fun. Like,
okay.
I thought it was going to be a riot. The elements that I liked about it are the things that you should take away from it, I guess. Whereas like I liked the camaraderie between all the contestants and the subverting expectation of that and Sandra Bullock's growth through that. I think Sandra Bullock's performance is really strong. I enjoyed her a lot. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't really laugh out loud at any point, and maybe that's because like a lot of the gags and stuff are really mean-spirited.
Okay.
And kind of cloaked in, I don't know, belittling someone else, like whether it's like something that's a bit homophobic or, you know, just like overtly sexist, or, you know, even something super fiddly to deal with, like eating disorders or sexual assault. Like it just seemed like a bit like, oh, wow, oh man, like when am I meant to laugh at this? Like I guess when she falls over because she can't walk in heels, it's pretty funny, but like, I don't know, that's not immediately relatable to me. But yeah, I thought it would be more fun, but I loved the empowering elements of it.
Yeah, see, is that I kind of have a pretty inverse take, which is because I still like this movie, I still watch it because I still find it funny.
Mm-hmm.
But each time I watch it, I am a bit more like, oh, it's not as empowering. It's not, the camaraderie is not as strong as I kind of thought. Like all those elements that probably when I was a teenager I thought were really strong,
mm-hmm.
I think less and less now. But I still find sort of the very of their time jokes quite funny.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to Legally Blonde. Another strong would probably be like Sandra Bullock's performance. It's kind of the strongest part of the movie,
mm-hmm.
quite similar to Legally Blonde. Like I do think that she's great in it. I think she's great in, like, she's a really strong comedic actress.
Mm-hmm.
And a dramatic one as well. But I do think she kind of carries it. She carries the second one as well.
Yeah.
I do think she's very likable despite kind of how unlikable her character is at times.
I think she's definitely got like the character of Gracie Hart definitely has like a definitive internal rule book of right and wrong, and sort of upholds that to almost like fascist elements sometimes.
Well, she challenges authority a lot, whether it's coming from, you know, like FBI hierarchy or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that, but yeah, I don't know. She is such a cop. Yeah. I think it's also, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I realized I hadn't watched it in full for a long time, because as a kid, I sort of got into this habit of if there were scenes I didn't like and I was rewatching a movie, I would just skip them. Yeah. So I used to skip the start quite a bit. And I rewatched it on the weekend and I realized I hadn't seen like the flashback to when she's a kid in so long. So I knew the gist of like, she fights off a bully and the boy doesn't like her. But I forgot about the, you know, you called me a girl bit. And yeah. And even that, like straight off the bat, is a kind of uncomfortable. But then she has that growth, so that's kind of like the point of the character.
Yeah,
but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you didn't. I mean, I still think it's funny. Like to me, the ending, the crowning scene with when Cheryl gets like crowned and Sandra Bullock is fighting to like get this crown off her, like fighting off beauty queens with William Shatner in the background, like doing his spoken word performance.
Oh yeah, that shit kills. Like look, it's not to say that it weren't funny bits. Like that was very good. Like she's Miss United States. That like, shit is very funny.
That scene in particular, I just think is pitch perfect. Like everything about it when when she's bashing her with the flowers, all of it. So there's those kind of peaks, and the April 25th.
Oh yeah, that's very funny. Yeah.
I think those are the moments that are the reason that it's still, and I think those moments in particular are more like they still kind of a meme. Like they still do the rounds on some of the social media that I use that I won't name.
Yeah.
They still do those rounds. And I think that holds, whereas more like Your Legally Blondes, it does still come back to the empowering message. I don't know that people kind of really buy into that as much in 2023 about Miss Congeniality. But yeah.
No, I would also say that because perhaps it's more a journey of insecurity rather than a triumph of someone, say in the case of Legally Blonde and the character of Elle Woods. Like she's very fully formed in who she is. Like there's a different growth,
Yeah,
but she's not coming from a point of insecurity. It's completely different. Whereas Sandra Bullock's character is out and out repressed because of insecurity, and comes out the end of it, you'd say in a better place, which we'll obviously touch on with our grading criteria at the very end of the pod. But I would say one of the things that kind of held me back in it all is like it seems like it is a film about insecurity that has its cake and eats it too. So a good example of someone overcoming insecurity and being vulnerable and welcoming in a world that they had written off is Gracie's character, and she sort of gains strength in womanhood and puts herself out there and gets friends when in the first place she didn't have friends and was sort of hiding behind her insecurity in many different ways. But there's a bunch of other super insecure characters who just fucking get by. And so obviously like Eric is the classic example of that, who's just an out and out prick and gets away with doing stuff, does not pay for the consequences or suffer the consequences.
No.
And the other one that I found like kind of difficult, it kind of ate at me a bit, is Candice Bergman's character, who is being fired because of her physical appearance. Like, and she's not being credited for her good work. So effectively, like it's the same empathy issue, right? That Gracie Hart is going through, but for whatever reason, she gets framed as a villain and doesn't get the chance to have like this redemptive arc just because the story needs a cartoonish villain. And it's kind of just harrowing. Like they are suffering the same situation where there are two women who are being, effectively at polar opposites, critiqued on their appearance and not for their performance, and are suffering as a result of it. Yet one is the villain and one is the hero. I found that kind of difficult to reconcile with. But I'd say that has got a fair bit to do with the writing and the directing sort of being out of touch with what you and I feel valuable as cinematic qualities of representation.
Yeah, in terms of the writing, I actually think, and I was thinking about today, that this film is actually a pretty incisive analysis of like sexual harassment in the workplace, and on a couple of levels. I don't think it's doing that on purpose, and I think it is just purely doing it for comedic reasons.
Yeah.
And it's purely of its time. But when you kind of look at it with that lens, all this material is there. But I was thinking about the reception as well. I didn't dig too much into this like I did with Thelma and Louise because I didn't really care. But apparently the reviews when it came out were pretty mid, and it was mostly about Sandra being good. Like that kind of your opinion that the jokes weren't weren't really that funny, but that she kind of gives a strong performance.
Yeah,
so,
I guess that was just fine. Like I also don't want to like knock the arc of Sandra Bullock's character because it is impressive and there are incredible empowering moments. And I know I said like her character is a fascist, but like I think the good outweighs the bad for sure.
I absolutely think you can knock the arc because it's that pretty classic. I don't know if you would necessarily classify this as a rom-com, but it is that pretty classic rom-com trope of like career-driven woman, it seems like unfulfilled, and it's just embracing femininity. Like, and it's sort of like at no point before she goes into the pageant does she sort of express any interest in being feminine. So it's like, why does her self-realization have to come with becoming a more feminine person and becoming sort of more integrated into, beauty standards and grooming culture, I don't necessarily buy into the arc in the way that I did as a younger person. Also, I just think this movie has the difficulty, of course, of being that the main setting for it is a beauty pageant, which I can't in good conscience, I'm a little bit past now, just let all women do whatever they want, and that's feminism. Being in a beauty pageant, I'm sorry, Candice Bergen, it's not a scholarship program. It's a beauty pageant, and it is there to kind of uphold patriarchal standards of beauty and make women compete on an aesthetic level. And that's kind of fucked, at its core. So to kind of have someone go through that and then come out like a more complete person and in a relationship with a man who sexually harasses her throughout the entire movie and be like, I think I've talked myself out of this movie now.
I fucking got you.
Done with it. I don't. Yeah, I mean, not to spoil our own podcast, but I think at the end I'm not going to say that this holds up as a feminist work. But there is still interesting stuff to talk about. So
yeah, for sure. Shall we talk about the people who made it, or how little we know about them?
How little we know? Yes. So
Donald Petrie.
I've heard of Mystery Pizza. I haven't seen it. Have you seen any of his other films?
I have seen quite a few of his films. Shall we whip through his filmography?
Yeah. Oh, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I think that might be it. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Sorry, I'm jumping around.
My note on this guy, which I think is tremendously funny, and I'm going to let you just accept this funny gag for what it is. But Donald Petrie strikes as a guy who just loves a generically saturated fish out of water matinee movie. It's just every single one of these movies, and we'll whip through them, so and so is this great, but they've got to do this. How are they gonna cope? That's every single one of his movies.
Okay. I haven't even heard. The only one I've seen is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which I don't like. I think I just find a pretty unpleasant movie. Richie Rich?
Richie Rich is one of my childhood favorite movies.
Okay.
Yeah, Donny Boy. Donny Boy has had an effect on me, and I didn't even know it. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. But some pretty big titles here. Grumpy Old Men, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, started work on MacGyver.
Oh, actually, you know what? I think I've seen My Favorite Martian, but I can only remember this this.
Oh shit! Yeah, I've seen My Favorite Martian as well.
Yeah.
Which is again just a matinee, generically saturated fish out of water movie. Because this guy's a nepo baby, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, his dad was a director. His dad directed A Raisin in the Sun, and his brother is a screenwriter. His brother wrote Beverly Hills Cop. So,
his mother is also a producer.
Big old nepo baby. So yeah.
We don't have much to say about Donald. I mean, in terms of Miss Congeniality, it's pretty generic, it's pretty bland. Yeah. I don't think there's very much. And like I said before, while I think there's some interesting things that you can pick out of it, I don't think any of it comes from any particular authorial intent from this guy. Pretty similar with the writer who has worked on a couple of Sandra Bullock movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say Mark Lawrence, Katie Ford, and Karen Lucas are all very much of the same ilk. They're just they're almost just industry writers who've written a lot of 6 out of 10 IMDb movies of similar generic look. They have no specific style. They're just kind of almost like family movies that people are going to go and see. There's definitely hits there for sure. There's big hits that they've put together.
Miss Congeniality too, Armed and Fabulous.
Yeah.
I do like that, a bit of consistency that he wrote the second one. And also 2 Weeks Notice, which is, I think is a cute little rom-com movie with Sandra Bullock again and Hugh Grant and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But
one of the writers also wrote music and lyrics, which is pretty much just like the same.
Yeah, which I was sitting there thinking that Sandra Bullock was in it, but it's Drew Barrymore.
Well, these are just like these little cookie cutter movies, man. Like
it's very
Sunday night ironing movies, as my mum would call them.
It's very go to the movie. Mum, do you want to go to the movies?
Yeah.
Like, it is very that.
It's safe, switch off your brain sort of stuff, which is not a bad
no,
thing. Like,
no.
I don't want to be here potting these guys who obviously worked super hard and have worked their way into the industry. Not Donald, because he's a Nepo baby, fucking son of a bitch. But but yeah, like look, I'm basing this solely on the work that they've put together. That I don't think any of these guys are bad guys. Don't think they care enough about stuff, like to the point where they would use shit that's kind of offensive as a punchline without sort of clocking that it might be offensive to someone. So take that for what it is. But yeah, that's just how I feel about their back catalog.
The only point of interest I have is that Katie Ford is an out lesbian, which to me is where probably Miss New York's bit, which I enjoyed that bit as well.
And I was so surprised that got played for laughs. Like that actually got me. Like,
yeah,
I was just like, this is great. And then there's people like, get her off. I'm like, oh my god, this is harrowing. Like, how?
But it's very 90s. But I kind of think it's a bit of both. I like that she does it. I like her partner in the audience. I like the other lesbian in the control room, and I like.
Yeah. I like Sandra Bullock's reaction.
I like Sandra Bullock's little, her nod and her clap. Like, and I think it's funny, the whole getting her, like, I like that whole moment. I think it's pretty well balanced. I think it's better than a lot of the Michael Caine, Benjamin Bratt, I got to leave the restaurant because I'm going to be near a date. Like, that to me is that.
Yeah, it's.
I can't even tell.
That's kind of the worst kind of homophobia in a lot of ways. That, yeah. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. It's nasty.
Yeah, and it runs through the whole movie in this way that I find really annoying. Like, particularly at the end when they're like rushing back to like help her, and he takes this moment to be like, oh, I'm not with him. And it's like, fucking who gives a shit?
Especially at that point in the movie. Like,
exactly. In the climax.
Like, yeah. And that's what I mean by it's like, it has its cake and eats it too. Like, it kind of should be one for all or for one at that point. Like, it's not that hard to write that character just to have like a bit of like a turn where they're just like, oh shit, I accept everyone. Like, and you get a little bit of vulnerability from Eric in that pool scene, but like, I don't think it's enough in any way, shape, or form. Like, that could, I don't know, it could be completely fraudulent, like what he's saying in that scene, because it just doesn't match with the rest of his character.
It's pretty just lazy writing. Yeah, I think Eric is. It's a shame they didn't put a bit more effort into him. But actually, I feel like this could be a good kind of moment because sort of the main thing that I took away from this movie, particularly on this viewing, is my 3 words in bold are a hostile work environment. This movie, the way that she is treated in the FBI is astonishingly bad. Mm-hmm. Like from the get-go. I mean, even in that opening scene in the Russian restaurant, like the guy on the surveillance kind of takes the time to harass and body shame a woman who can't hear him. Like, this woman's got 2 asses. Like, I don't, and my sort of, I guess problem with it is that I don't think any of that is like an intentional commentary on like the boys club that is the FBI. It's just played for gags because none of those people have any kind of change except a tiny bit. Eric, he makes them respect her a tiny bit. But there isn't any, this is the thing. It's all about her changing. It's all about her becoming more feminine and therefore a more sort of acceptable woman while still being a successful FBI agent. You know, Eric, I guess, kind of changes a little bit. You could make an argument for, but none of the other FBI guys do. Her boss doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
There's no scenes of them kind of recognizing any issues with their behavior. It's all about her having to make changes. And what I kind of thought was really interesting about it this time in particular as I was watching it is it really struck me that I think in a lot of movies you would have, like, for example, Vasquez in Alien, when you have that kind of more masculine character, that's what kind of brings her into the boys' club and makes her, like, on their level.
Yeah. Whereas
Gracie doesn't have that. She is extremely masculine. But like you say, she's very insecure, and I think that's probably what's holding her back. But she does have this intensely masculine presentation. She's trying so hard. I mean, in my opinion, she's trying so hard to, like, get this camaraderie with, you know, the men that she works with and get their respect.
Yeah, and you see that in, like, the clothes generator scene on the computer, which amazing technology.
Oh, yeah, like, she tries to join in with it, and maybe she has success to an extent, but not fully. Like, Eric doesn't like, she doesn't have anyone sitting with her at the bar when she's, like, drowning her sorrows in Ben and Jerry. She doesn't, it struck me when they're having that meeting. I think this was the first time I kind of really noticed it, that Eric is just floundering, doesn't know what to do, and she's telling him what to do in this very clever way that a lot of women do, of, like, making a suggestion and then letting a man take it on as if it's his idea.
Yeah.
And she's so clever, like, she knows that she has to do it that way because she knows that even though she's trying to be one of the boys, she's not really one of them.
Yeah.
And throughout the whole movie, they're, particularly with the surveillance footage, as they're watching the other women, like, through her little camera and Operation Thong, like, this is all just an extremely, we need to report them to HR. Like, where is the HR department at the FBI? But I also kind of wanted to know, so that's, like, sexual harassment in a very male-dominated industry. But even in the female-dominated industry, Creepy Frank, how is Creepy Frank still working at the pageant? Like, how is it
He's
that
an Nepo baby, just like Donny Boy.
True. But even they are supposed to be, you know, I mean, I don't know a lot about pageants, but in my watching of this movie, they're supposed to be, you know, the highest. They're going for Miss United States. They're the contestants. They're the main attraction. They're the reason the whole thing is happening. And they still have fucking Creepy Frank making sexual comments to them, clearly unreciprocated. Like, so that kind of struck me today. I was thinking about it, like, that this movie is able to present that, hey, even in an industry where you were, like, a leader in a female-dominated industry, you will still be subject to unwanted sexual comments and harassment in the workplace.
Yeah.
And there truly is no escape.
Yeah, and it's kind of made pretty clear super early, like, pretty much every conversation that Eric has with Gracie, he's commenting on her physical appearance. Even in that scene in the bar where he brings in that date, he says that she's not a woman. Like, it's really full on, and yeah, it's super yuck. And
I find Cheryl as a character really interesting as well, and I really like the actress Heather Burns, because she's been in a couple of, she was in 2 Weeks Notice as well. She's a really strong, supporting, you know, she's very often, like, the best friend in a rom-com. I think she's really good. I think she's really good in this, but I just find the character of Cheryl so interesting because in a lot of ways she has the same problems as Gracie, only she's not trying to be sort of hyper-masculine to hide her insecurity. She's trying to be hyper-feminine to hide her insecurity.
Yes. And she's a nuclear scientist, I believe.
See, this is where the bad writing kind of comes into it, is because, you know, at one point it's brought up that she was in a terrorist animal rights organization. And then at the end of the movie, it turns out she's she's doing a science degree majoring in nuclear fusion or something. And that's all just said about her. You kind of don't dig into, and it's like, that's just thrown in there to be like a plot point, which I think is kind of a shame because you kind of could have given a bit more depth to Cheryl, and they do a little bit with, like, her whole college experience. But like, you can tell that she's, and I think Heather Burns is really interesting casting because I also don't think that she would be stereotypically who you would pick as a pageant winner. Like, she's obviously very beautiful, like very attractive, very beautiful, but like I said, she's usually cast as the best friend, not like the main character. So it's kind of interesting for her to be cast as Miss Rhode Island and then eventually the winner of the pageant. But yeah, she's also a bit of an outsider amongst women. Like, she's pretty clearly, to me, ostracized by her own neediness, like her own desperate want to have friends is kind of off-putting to the other girls, and you can kind of see it on the tram when she's sitting by herself and she's memorized the whole pamphlet. Like, I find it quite a little bit relatable, especially as a kid. Yeah, like her femininity, which she's using so strongly to fit in, is kind of also what's ostracizing her, and it's only the integration of another sort of outsider in a different way that can kind of, build up her self-confidence a little bit for real, so that she can actually make connections with people.
Yeah. And I definitely loved their relationship. That was probably my favorite part of the whole film, just seeing those two characters sort of bounce off of each other, because it was super engaging. And like, it just grew in empathy, I guess, as you sort of get to know her a little bit more, and the traumas that she's been through.
Yeah. And that definitely feels the most real. Like, when I said before that I find some of the the camaraderie, like, I don't find it as strong as I used to, I still think it is one of the stronger elements of the movie. Like, her and Cheryl in particular, but the night where they go clubbing.
Yeah, that's so fun.
It's just fun. It's just nice to see two women who had no friends who are suddenly able to go out. I mean, we don't learn that much about the other contestants, really. But it's nice to see them actually sort of enjoying themselves in that way and making connections and, learning from each other. And then it's again, it's at the end when Michael Caine has left and she has to do her own makeup and they all come in and help her. Like, that's a nice moment as well. But I do think there is like this annoying level of cattiness, which isn't... for me, it would be kind of okay if it's like it's there at the start and then we become friends and we just drop those pretenses. Like, it's natural. We're in a competition. We don't know each other. There's this level of cattiness, but now we've become friends, so we're just going to drop that. We're not going to worry about it. It's still kind of there, like even later, even in that scene with the makeup, immediately before that happens, it's all this like, maybe the pressure got too much and she dropped out. There is this still kind of bitchiness there, which I just is sort of like, no, we've just had this great bonding moment. Like, why are they still being shitty? And I think, to be honest, that's just the kind of lazy thing about, bitchy beauty queens, which is a line that comes up later. So I don't think it's consistent enough to really be successful, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. I just want to get your opinion on the makeover scene and the reveal. So can you tell me what it was like when you first saw it and what it's like
I loved it. As a kid, loved it. Like, I think that this is another thing about the appeal of it to younger people. And it's kind of similar with Legally Blonde, where it is just, I don't know, maybe this is my experience. As a little girl, I like to watch, beautiful like femininity on screen. I did enjoy that. And the makeover scene, definitely as a kid found it funny, enjoyed it, and just liked the reveal. I'm like, oh, she's so pretty now. I wish I was pretty. Like, it's very that. Yeah. But now I was struck kind of more recently how I watched it, where it was sort of how the joke is that she's kind of perceiving it as torture. Like, that's the joke, right? Is that because she's so unfeminine, she doesn't brush her hair, it's like they're torturing her. And that to me is kind of, again, about, Donald not getting it, where it's like a lot of these practices are kind of torturous. Like, a lot of people's beauty routine, like waxing, a lot of these routines are not, they're not just not like, they're not normal things that people like would just do if they didn't have to because of beauty standards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was kind of struck by like this complete lack of awareness of, and I didn't really think I was kind of going to go this blunt, but like this complete lack of awareness of a man director being like, isn't it funny that this butch FBI agent thinks that it's torture to like get a bikini wax? And I'm like, well, have you ever had a bikini wax? Because that shit fucking hurts. Like, it is kind of torturous, and she shouldn't have to do it, and she does because of this industry, which is, and anyway, how would you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like crazy that it's like a scientific procedure. It kind of it had a bit of like fucking RoboCop about it. Somehow it's just like,
exactly.
We've got a mission to do. We must transform this beast for our own benefit.
That's a really good comparison, actually, I think.
Yeah, and it's just like it's kind of dehumanizing in a lot of ways. And then sort of the payoff is she gets rewarded or recognized by her male counterparts who she's desperately trying so hard to appeal to. They finally look at her, and it's not because of her skill set, but not because of her as a person. So, I mean, you get the funny gag, you get the funny line of her walking away and falling over, and like the slow motion shot. But it's hard to watch that and have the desired effect of what the filmmakers want, because I know in my heart of hearts that it's wrong. So it was a hollow viewing for me at that point.
I think also, I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen one for a while. I think the makeover of that kind is very on the out now. Like, I don't think I've seen one sort of like that. And I think it's because people are more and more having the same realization that it's like you're changing yourself, because it used to be the makeover is just the revelation of the true beautiful person they are inside or whatever. Like, and that's how you find your inner strength, is by, completely changing your physical appearance. But I think we now kind of get it more that that's what it is that she's seeking validation. And now, unfortunately, she's found that she can get it by wearing a really short dress and having her hair styled. I also think it's interesting, like, even the dehumanizing comment, like, even she internalizes that herself. Like, later in the movie, when Candice Bergen takes credit for her transformation, and she goes, no, that wasn't you. And it wasn't me either. It was Michael Caine and some beauticians. Like, it's all...
Yeah. Even the character that Michael Caine plays, and I think he does do a good job. I'm not knocking Michael Caine. I'm a big fan. But, like, I think that character is also falls into the trap of a very insecure individual who values themselves through their work and not necessarily, what's inside, and has a lot of problems as a result of it. Like, this guy's out of work because he's pushed people to the brink of mental breakdowns because he takes his work too seriously. And again, kind of just gets away with it. Doesn't really has no growth other than having a gun pulled on him, which is probably like one of the best examples of someone being too insecure to handle themselves as well, with Sandra Bullock's character. But it's a lot of stuff that's just played for gags, and it just gets a little bit tiresome. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it was just meant to be a fun thing, and these people never really thought about it. But the reality
I think it's obvious
through the zeitgeist, and it affects people, and people model themselves on this sort of stuff. So
100% they didn't think of it, and that's kind of the problem. But it's interesting what you say about Michael Caine, and we already mentioned it about what's his name? Benjamin Bratt was his character's name.
Eric.
Like, you're right. They don't have really any sort of arc. Eric is as sleazy at the end as he was at the start. He just thinks she's hot now.
Yeah.
And they're going to, like, fuck. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
He gets that one moment where she's in the swimsuit and he's, like, blocks the screen. But that's it. He makes no sort of significant change. Because he doesn't even, and I only just realized this, when she says, we got to check out Candice Bergen, he doesn't even go back until he hears from Michael Caine that creepy Frank is her son.
Yeah.
He's going to fucking leave her there. He doesn't care about her opinion.
Yeah.
He has to get it reinforced by something that Michael Caine says. Like,
which is shaky anyway because he doesn't like Michael Caine.
Yeah, it's just sort of it's very lazy writing. It's very, the screenplay doesn't really hold up. I also was sort of thinking this time as I was watching, I was like, why do the Russians at the start, shouldn't they sort of be involved somehow in the class? Or shouldn't like the opening kind of thing maybe have been something to do with the citizen or something? Like they have this thing with the Russians at the start and then it's the citizen who's not even the real villain. He's just some other terrorist. Like all of that shit could have just been timed up maybe with a couple more drafts. But
is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to mention that you think hasn't aged well and would be done differently today?
I don't know. To be honest, I think the whole thing hasn't really aged well. I don't think you could make this kind of movie about... I think if you made a movie now about beauty pageants, it wouldn't end with this kind of, beauty pageants help women find themselves kind of ending. Like, I think that there's just too much sort of criticism about that concept in general to really go that way. I think any other movie that kind of... And even in that, even having said that, I'm just thinking now of like Drop Dead Gorgeous, which was like 1998, which takes a much more sort of deconstruction of the concept of the beauty pageant and like what it's for. Mm. So even movies before this were kind of doing more interesting stuff with beauty pageants than this. So yeah, to me, the whole thing kind of doesn't really age well. Like I said, I still find some of the jokes funny, but they're kind of the jokes that are kind of contextless. Like, the finale scene is just pitch perfect, and the April 25th. And I really love when Cheryl's like, oh, my parents don't like anything ostentatious and they really don't like fire. Like, that is so funny.
Yeah.
But again, I just think it has some kind of zingy one-liners. So yeah, to me, the whole thing, you wouldn't make it this way now. You would have to kind of do it as a deconstruction now.
Yeah, for sure.
Not played as straight as it is.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm pretty much the same thing. I feel like audiences have entirely moved beyond the premise of, what? A girl? Like, I think perhaps you could recycle the inciting incident or just like the premise in general. But yeah, I don't think you'd be doing it that way. I mean, like...
It's interesting because
it's weird that this can exist when, 10 years earlier, the Silence of the Lambs came out, which effectively has a very, I don't know, sure of themselves female lead who is kind of disrespected for who they are. Like, obviously, Jodie Foster's character has some shortcomings in a lot of the ways, but ultimately within her professional field, she's pretty much covered. Like, there's a few people who like treat her badly, but like, I don't know. It seems like a huge regression.
It's pretty obvious. Like, to Donald, it's a pretty straightforward, like, fish out of water comedy. And that would maybe kind of work in going into a different industry, or there's too many, I think, ramifications and nuances of taking an extremely insecure, hyper-masculine person out of a hyper-masculine workplace and putting him into this hyper-feminine world. Like, there are just so many nuances and implications to that he just does not understand.
Yeah.
So he has no way of navigating that in any kind of like sensitive or nuanced way, which is how we kind of get this pretty shallow thing that we get.
Yeah, for sure. Shall we move into Sexy Lamp?
Yeah, okay.
Our favourite segment, Sexy Lamp. If you can replace a female character with a sexy lamp, you're a fucking hack. Again, possibly one of the strengths of this movie and other movies that we've been reviewing is that I don't think there are any female characters that you probably could sexy lamp.
My sexy lamp is a woman. But just because
I was not expecting that at all. Go ahead.
Well, it's pretty, like, I think... because you have so many background, like, women, you could have kind of said any. The closest for me was probably Miss California, because she's one of, like, the sort of the the 4 or 5 beauty queens that we get to meet, but she just has no like impact on the plot. She has no, like, at least Texas kind of gets to gossip and be like, oh, Stan's getting fired, and at least like Aloha, like Miss Hawaii, like gets that confrontational scene, and like New York gets to come out of it as a lesbian, and then California is just kind of there being like, hey girl, like that's all she does. So I think she's kind of my sexy lamp for this one.
Nice.
You could have just cut her and just had like 4 of them instead of anyway.
Yeah. Mine is Frank. Frank is my sexy lamp.
How is he the sex? He's a henchman. He does too much.
No, he doesn't really need to be there. That character doesn't need to exist. He's just kind of a red herring for mine. Like, I mean, his mum is the mastermind. Like, I think it could have been done as a better reveal. Like, if he had been there and it's sort of made out that he is, you know, he's sort of set up to be the villain, and then the reveal is a la Stepford Wives, that it was the person running the beauty pageant all along. That would probably be a stronger twist, but we find out behind the scenes and there's no real surprise. Like, Gracie always has that hunch, and I don't know, he's just kind of there bumbling, being a sex pest. So he's an unsexy lamp for mine.
Okay. I mean, to me, I think that like, even if it's really poorly done,
as a pivotal.
No, I'm not saying he has a pivotal role, but I'm just saying that even though it's really poorly done and it's bad writing, he does function as something of a red herring. He does function a little bit to move the plot forward. So I don't think that you could have a sexy lamp, you know, triggering the bomb or whatever. So for me, that's why he doesn't qualify. But I get what you're saying.
Probably not in an objectified kind of way, which is probably what the sexy lamp thing is all about. But yeah, it just kind of pointless, and perhaps leaning into some of the lazy writing when there could have been a better option to use a character like that.
I think you just want this movie to be written better, and unfortunately, you'll have to watch.
I know
you'll have to watch. I mean, you'll have to watch Miss Congeniality too after the fact you listen to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe just. I think it was interesting what you were saying a bit about like Candice Bergen and like the having the cake and eating it too, in that you're kind of right. Like, there is this kind of parallel between those two characters that isn't really explored in any kind of interesting way and isn't really resolved in a particularly interesting way. And I just think that it's a bit of a missed opportunity. Like, I think Candice Bergen's a pretty great actress, and she could have been a bit more interesting in this role, especially with her line about, you know, what's that like? She's been fighting against women like Gracie her whole life. Feminists, ugly women. Like, I just think that there is this kind of, they both have this hostility to other women in, you know, in their own ways that I think could have been explored a bit in a bit more depth and nuance. But obviously, like, I just want this movie to be better written, and that won't happen.
We are pushing into our grading criteria for this movie and what we use on all movies. Does it Fight Club? Does she make it? And does it Bechdel? Does it Fight Club? And I will define this again. Does this movie have a reverse effect of what it was intended to do? So in the example of Fight Club, a film that should be a basic, geez, bloody mental health's a bit full on, story ends up being an excuse for teenage boys to have underground boxing clubs in school gyms. Cara, does this film Fight Club?
I don't know if it does, just because I don't think it really has any intentions.
Yeah. What was Ridley Scott quote last week? It was just like...
it's just... I think this movie has what I like to call applicability, which is this kind of whatever your position is when you watch it, you can kind of apply it to this. Mm-hmm. So that's like it is for me, because I have this interest in feminism. I can kind of read into this, how they're representing, you know, beauty procedures, how they're representing sexual harassment in the workplace. I think if you don't really care about those things, then you won't kind of pick up on any of that. So I don't know how to answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, I would say no, it doesn't Fight Club, but maybe it doesn't bring enough to the table to warrant the scale tipping in either direction.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a
I think actually you
it's a
could
no, but what's it worth?
You possibly could. There possibly could be a section of the audience who are watching it who have this kind of who take this kind of not like other girls mentality from that. I think that runs pretty strong through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, I think the sort of the camaraderie that she does develop, like she makes, I do really love that speech that she makes about how she used to hate pageants and now she met these women and she thinks they're amazing. I do like that speech, except for the fact that it doesn't change the fact that pageants are still shit.
Yeah. I found it moving as well. And I also like the sing scene as well when she's doing the
the
self-defense.
The self-defense.
And I can't believe we haven't mentioned that because it is, again, possibly the most empowering moment in the film. Like, how did you find it and how do you find it now?
Actually, I don't find that one like that. I do love that scene, but I actually find the scene where they're in the bar and Cheryl kind of tells her about her assault and how she never told anyone that and how upset Gracie is by that. Like, I actually find that to be one of like the most, like the moments where I feel the most connected to her because she's so upset by it. And that's like, it's honestly like beautiful because, and when Cheryl says it happens all the time, which it does, and Gracie's like, when Gracie says, no, it doesn't, she's not trying to say, no, it doesn't happen all the time, because it does happen all the time. It means just because it happens doesn't mean you should take it as the norm and therefore acceptable. Like, I really love that bit more. And when she tries to teach Cheryl self-defense and Cheryl passes, like, I love that scene. I like the thing as well. Like, that's just great. But the really emotional one for me is more the one at the bar where it's one-on-one between this person who's trying to denormalize what happened, like what a survivor has gone through and say, no, you survived something. And also let me like teach you some ways to protect yourself.
Yep.
I like that.
Yeah, me too. Which works in well to our next question. Does it Bechdel? Just defining the Bechdel test again. A film has to have two named women who talk to each other about something besides a man. And that happens on a fair few occasions in this film. So it is a pass mark, but I guess it's probably worth touching on the strength of those scenes and what they're used for. I think the one that comes to mind is when they're having hot chocolate together.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that scene, yeah. I think that's really nice because to me that's just two like lonely people who aren't very good at making friends really forming a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not talking about men. It is nice. They're talking about, you know, their talent, like what they're going to do in the pageant, how they're going to participate, I think.
And their aspirations and goals. Like it's pure. It's just a great scene.
So yeah, Bechdel's tick.
Yeah. All right. And then the big one, does she make it?
No. I'm sorry. I don't think he does. I don't think he does.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, maybe 10 years ago I would have been like, yeah, because she comes out of it a happier, more confident person. But to me, it has just become about, like, she was looking for that validation by being, like, a good FBI agent. And now she's kind of doing it by being a good FBI agent who's also sexy. And I don't think it holds up. I don't think in, you know, the year of our Lord 2023 that we can say that this is like a successful outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. Ultimately, on a greater scope, no, she doesn't make it because she's with that guy.
I mean, that's the thing is like, I mean, we don't usually talk about this of like, does she make it? But it's also I think the other sticking point for me for the ending is that neither of the main male characters have had to undergo any development whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
They remain the same.
Yeah.
And it's like, that ain't it.
And they don't even get any sort of residual growth. Like, you know, like second growth. Yeah.
Eric's a tiny bit nicer, but then again, I'm like, his last line of the movie is basically, yeah, I like your tits.
Yeah. 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 And he still kind of gets to be a bit of a hero in the final conflict scene as well. So it's not a great outcome.
No.
So there you go. So I guess my final question for you is, do you think this film is helpful or harmful?
I guess if I had to say one or the other, I probably would say harmful. But again, I wouldn't go so far as to say you shouldn't watch it or you should cancel it. I think if you watch anything with a critical eye, it can be fine. But to me, in the way it kind of just normalizes, basically the message is, to me, it's like uphold patriarchal beauty standards and you too can achieve confidence, happiness, and success. Like, I think that that's kind of too key to it for me to say that it's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'd have to agree to be very boring. But yeah, I'm obviously, like, I can view it in sort of more of a cushy transcendental kind of way. Sort of, I guess, growing up when this came out, this thing wasn't targeted at me and probably isn't targeted at me in my current demographic either. And again, I would only be seeing it as like a residual secondhand kind of thing more often than not. Like I said, I thought it was probably going to be more funny and more empowering. I didn't expect there to be as many gags that were, at other people's expense, because it felt counterintuitive to the message that this movie was apparently projecting. But yeah, I guess it's fine.
Yeah, like that being said,
like if you wanted to watch this as a fucking Sunday night ironing movie to switch your brain off and just have some color and a few laughs, you could definitely do it. If you wanted to dig beneath the surface, you could get hurt like me and you.
And that being said, I probably will watch it again. It's a very good comfort movie for me if I'm sick or if I just want to, like you say, just put something on. I will definitely watch this movie again. I would definitely watch Miss Congeniality 2 again. But yeah, it kind of sucks. It's like The West Wing for me. Even when I know it sucks, I still go back to it.
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't want to shame anybody for liking this movie either. Like I'm just watching it as an adult who had a certain lens on, who wanted to dissect something for a specific reason. And it doesn't mean that if you enjoy this or you have like nostalgic connections to it, that you shouldn't enjoy it, because every piece of media is special to somebody, and that's a great thing as well. So yeah, I don't want to bum anyone out. I like Space Jam. What can I say?
Yeah, Space Jam.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's a tidy little anticlimax to end on. I think we'll wrap it up there. This has been another episode of A Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discovers whether or not they are helpful or harmful. Catch us next time for another installment.